Hello everyone, this is Mrs. Nguyen. In this PowerPoint lecture, I will be talking about the essay structure, which is a very important lesson, and the things that you'll be learning from this PowerPoint presentation is expected to be applied to all of your compositions in this course throughout. Okay, so in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about the basic essay structure that you are expected to follow in all of your essay writing in this class. I also have, I'll also be talking a little bit about, well, not a little bit, but as much as I can, about what that essay structure entails or includes in terms of um, the basic components that must make up the structure and the essential elements that must be embodied in each of the component. All right, so let's look at the screen up here for me. You see, I'm going to start off by just talking generally about how we use language, because the assumption that, well, first off, we use language basically in two ways, to speak and to write. So there are two types of language use that we employ. One is to speak and one is to write. And of course, um, in speaking, most of us may use language differently than we do when we write, and that is absolutely okay, because a general speaking context, the demands and the urgency for a general speaking context may be different from um, a context in which writing occurs, right? So all of that um, kind of converged to um, to inform us how we should use language. Um, Normally in class, I would ask for a survey of the class in terms of how each of the person in the class use language to speak, or how they would characterize their speech, and some general observations or just some similar things that people have said in response to this prompt is that you know when speaking they tend to use language in a more relaxed way. We tend to take shortcut, such as contractions. So instead of saying, you all, we tend to say y'all, or instead of saying do not, we tend to contract the two words and make it into don't. That kind of things is what I meant when I say we tend to take shortcut, and our use of language is not as rigorous or not as strict, right? We tend to relax on things such as, you know, rules, such as rules of grammar and all that kind of thing. And all of these things that we do when we speak are, the shortcuts and the relaxation are not necessarily bad things. They just sometimes, you can't really go around it. Sometimes they are necessary in a speech context, that you take shortcut, or that you relax your use of language, or that, you speak informally, you use, colorful expressions, regional expressions, or just any type of colloquial expressions, because generally speaking, a speech context does demand for more urgency and immediacy of messages being exchanged, right? You don't have that much time you don't have much time to kind of get your thought together in the most sophisticated way and then say them, right? You just, as a thought occurs to you, you just say them, right? So that you don't keep your audience, the person that you're speaking to, waiting on you, because that can create, um, an awkward situation, right? But when we write, right, and let me specify, right, or let me qualify, right, when you write in a formal context, such as for a course, for a class, college writing, or even at work, right, when you know that you have a critical audience on the other side of the message that you're trying to convey, right, that makes you become more aware of your language choices, that makes you become more, I guess, disciplined in your use of language choices. So I guess those are the fundamental differences between between the way we use language for speaking and the way we use language for writing. Um, and um, and I generally advise students to be more careful and to be more disciplined and to be more critical in how they use language when they are writing, right? That is a given, because writing can sometimes serve as documentation, be it your documentation or record of your skills, and it can reveal, very important things about not just about who you are, but about your education. Okay, I know that some places require their applicants or job candidates to take some kind of written assessment, right? And I'm sure that the purpose for written assessments um, you know, uh, for job position or anything like that is really to see, your level of education, to see how literate you are, because how we define, which is my last question here, how we define literacy in the 21st century is probably different from how literacy was defined maybe 100 years ago. And I would venture to say that we that we demand more of literacy nowadays than just the ability to read and the ability to write, right? Because we do live in a more populated world, more complex world, and I guess it is made complex by this rapid growth of technology and and the interconnectedness of people from all over the world. I don't want to use the word globalization, but it is easier to connect with someone from far away from different parts of the world. So all of this, and information is being disseminated at a much faster rate. And nowadays, anybody can, can spread any news, any messages they want to, no matter how fake or dishonest those messages or news stories may be, they are able to. So literacy, I think now it is necessary for us to account to to include in our definition of literacy the ability to interpret data or information, and the ability to evaluate data and information for things such as veracity or truthfulness and so forth. Okay. Written language is traditionally viewed as requiring more discipline. Both oral language can also warrant the same kind of attention. I've mentioned that. Usually in writing, in academic writing, right, we tend to consider the rhetorical situation. I'll talk a little bit about what that means, but remember I said that in academic writing, you have to give much more thought to the process and the product, right? And as well as the recipient of the product, which is the audience, right? And we, you have to give more thought to written communication, especially academic writing, than you would for oral communication in most cases, but not all. Okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit. So I've kind of differentiated uh, speaking, differentiated, I'm sorry, between speaking and academic writing, right? But just as a productive citizen in the real world, you write for many different purposes. You write in different contexts, I guess most of us, it's safe to say that we all have social media and we all write some things that are published online in some capacity or on some platform, right? And we also write in our text messages. We also write in technology, in emails and so forth, right? So all of that demands some kind of writing, but I guess the most demanding form of writing or type of writing that you will ever write is academic writing, the kind of writing that you do while you are in school pursuing a specific degree. Academic writing, and of course that includes your undergraduate studies, and if you should go on to your graduate studies, you most certainly include that as well. But of course, um, as a graduate student, you would have to be specialized in a certain scholarly discourses. But anyway, so let's talk a little bit about academic writing and what it means to write academically. Um, so writing in the academic world almost always means writing in a formal context for a very critical audience. Okay. Now, of course, this is, your targeted audience are critical. And of course, your critical audience is, as a student, your critical audience is, of course, your instructors or your professor, right? Who will be evaluating, looking at your writing with with a pair of very, very critical eyes. And it might feel like the instructor is nitpicking on every single thing that you do, and nothing ever seems to please him or her, right? So your instructor is certainly a a, a type of critical audience that you can have as the intended audience for an academic for a piece of academic writing. But in some cases, in your studies, your critical audience may also be your peers, right, or your colleagues, or in graduate, or if you're ever in graduate school, your critical audience would be the specific community, academic community, of scholars or practicing scholars or student scholars or whatever you want to call them. Um, and they are critical because they have very specific demands and expectations in terms of the topic. Okay, and and other things as well. Okay, so when you know that your audience will be critical, okay, that will inform your writerly decisions. And by writerly decisions, I mean the decisions that you have to make completely from the beginning of a writing project to the end of a writing project, because you are the owner of that project, right? It is your ownership. And it is a one person kind of ownership, right? You have to plan everything. You have to start everything. Okay, it's not like in a business where your business operation can be departmentalized into different areas and each department take care of different things. As an academic writer or as a writer, right, you are in charge of the entire process all by yourself from the beginning to end. So you have to own your intellectual property, and so in order to create a product or property, a piece of intellectual property. And by intellectual property, I just mean creative works that are original and that you create, right? And these creative works can be, um, you know, uh, uh, um, can be text such as, a painting that you've done, a book that you've written, an article that you've written, things like that are called intellectual property. But anyway, um, so you own that, right? So knowing who you're writing for, why you're writing, what is your purpose for writing, all of these questions, if you can address them and answer them yourself, can really tremendously help you to make good writerly decisions. And of course, as a student writer, you may not think that you're worth much in the academic community, but you are. I mean, you will have many opportunities to prove yourself, right? But you are taken seriously, right? And your essays are being evaluated seriously. So to prove your academic worth, your writing must reflect appropriate form and voice, right? You want to sound, you want to come across and you want to sound how uh, to, 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 to sound that would increase your chance of being accepted in the community that you're writing for. Okay, and I know I keep saying community and so forth, but this is a composition course, so you're just practicing. But as you go higher up, um, as you go high up and you get to take classes that are more specialized, right, that are closer and closer to your field or that go directly, into your field, then you get to communicate. Then your academic community is other fellow, for example, biology majors or biologists, or, nursing major or practicing nurses or nurse practitioners, right? Those would be your specific academic community. But I know that, this kind of composition courses, you don't get to, it's not major or discipline, it's not major specific, but you're still writing for an academic community. So let's talk a little bit about academic writing, and let's try to define it, even though it is hard to define because academic writing has many important features that binds all of the academic writings together. But there are some things that can be helpful to identify when we talk about that can be helpful to identify when we talk about academic writing. First and foremost, academic writing is writing with purpose. Now, of course, you may think, well, that pretty much describes all writing. We all write with purpose. When you write a text, you have a purpose for composing that text. Maybe you want to tell your friend to meet you at this specific place at 8 o'clock, or you want to tell your husband that you, or your, just your husband or wife, or your spouse that you'll be running late, because you have to stay an extra hour at work or whatever. So in that sense, your argument would be correct, right? In that we all write, not just, even for non-acad in even in non-academic situations, we all write with a purpose. So how does this distinction, right? How is this distinction only for academic? And you're right. Um, but academic writing purpose is a specific purpose. Usually, academic writing tends to contribute to a certain growing body of knowledge, right? We don't write just for the sake of writing or just for the sake of fulfilling an assignment. Okay, your scholars and your professors and your researchers in the academic world write with their specific purpose, and I guess this purpose is to contribute to the growing body of knowledge of a certain field, such as in biology or literary criticism of Shakespeare works, to shed light on things that are not known before or things not known previously, or to share new discoveries and things like that, right? So I would say that that is the main distinction between academic writing and non-academic writing, right? But we may write, to inform, right? That's also part of contributing to, sharing our knowledge or contributing to this, body of knowledge that are existing, but it's always expanding, right? Because, so therefore it is shapeless. But we also write to persuade, right? And of course, there are different rhetorical purposes. You can write to convince, you can write to inform, you can write to explore, you can write to blah, blah, expose, and so forth. So there are many rhetorical purposes. But up here, I've just put two. Academic writing also occurs within a specific rhetorical situation as it considers the impact of context and audience, right? And I've talked a little bit about this, how in an academic writing, right, before you sit down to write, you are responsible for the entire process from beginning to end. You make all the decisions by yourself, what to write about, who to write for, um, how to address your audience, what kind of evidence or data to use from this massive body of evidence, for example. So, how do you make that kind of decisions? Are there some guidelines that should, well, guide you in making towards, the right selections or the right decisions? And there's really no specific ways to say that, but a general rule is you would be served well as a writer if you were to consider the rhetorical situation. And the rhetorical situation, I'll go back to this slide here, includes these things. Okay, you have to know the context of your topic. Okay, and your writing should reflect your awareness of the context of your topic, right? You don't want to sound like you are the first person to be writing about this, right? You want to show that you are aware of the discourse or the conversations or dialogue that we're having as a society or community about this. You want to be made aware of what ideas have already been shared, what milestones have already been discovered, and things like that, right? That way you can situate yourself in the conversation in a specific way. And also, you always have to know your purpose for writing, especially in academic writing. Why are you writing? Are you writing to inform? If you are writing to inform, how would that piece of writing be different if you were to write to persuade, or if you were to write to only to explore, for example, to explore the causes of an issue? Okay, so your purpose for writing, right, can have an effect in producing a very specific text, right? And if you have a different purpose, but you're writing on the same topic, you can have two very different texts, two very different writings. Okay, and your audience is very, very important. You have to always know who you're writing for so that you know how to appeal to them in your writing, right? Because eventually, hopefully, the intellectual property that should come out of any writing effort or writing endeavor is a property or a text that will be well received, that your readership, that your audience, your intended audience will be receptive, will accept, right, and will hopefully um, exert an impact on your audience, right? um, Writing is pretty much useless if you have no readership, right? So another aspect of the whole writerly decision that you have to think about is, how am I going, first and foremost, how am I going to catch my intended audience's interest? And how do I maintain and sustain that interest throughout the entire piece of writing? How? Because you don't want to lose your reader after the first paragraph or maybe after the first page, right? Because you want to achieve your purpose, which is maybe to convince or to persuade. And you can't really do your persuasion if your audience abandons you halfway through your writing, then you have not achieved your purpose. So knowing who your intended audience is, who you are writing for, can help you to form a plan or to make certain decisions that will go toward creating a piece of writing that will best appeal to your audience, right? And asking more questions about your audience can further give you insight about how to approach your writing project. So don't simply stop at, I'm going to write for my fellow students, or my intended audience are teachers, or my intended audience are, middle class people. That's still a little bit too broad. You can always, always, always narrow them down. And there are other questions that you can ask, such as, what is my, intended audience's general attitude towards my topic? What is their general belief towards my topic, right? What misconceptions do they have about my topic, right? What more does my intended audience need to know about my topic? Mm, from what sources of information does my intended audience receive the information about my topic? Things like that, okay? Things like that, you should be asking about your audience, because the more of a detailed profile you can create about your intended audience, the more useful it is going to be for you as a writer. Okay, and of course you also have to think about other rhetorical strategies, such as your voice, your tone, the kind of your reasoning and the evidence that you use, and your persuasive strategies. So that is the rhetorical situation, and academic writing must consider the rhetorical situation, and the rhetorical situation changes for each academic writing occasion. Also, academic writing is also defined or characterized by a specific structure, and it must embody certain essential elements. So that specific structure and the essential elements is pretty much the topic of this lecture. It is that specific essay structure that we're going to talk about, and it has to have certain essential elements that we'll also talk about. Academic writing also uses academic terms, academic language, but also academic terms specific to a certain discourse or discipline. As you go further in your studies and you're writing more papers on biology, for example, or criminal justice, or nursing, or just any kind of, subfields in medicine, right? You're going to have to use the specialized vocabulary and terminologies of your field that only other biologists or criminal investigators or nurses would be familiar with, okay? Because you're writing for them, so you don't have to explain these terms. You can make the assumption that they understand, and that because of the shared knowledge between you and your intended audience. But for this class, because it's, a general composition class, um, your intended audience will not be that specialized, so you can always assume that it's always safe to explain certain unusual terms, or, not so normal terms. I'm sorry. Academic writing also often exhibits linguistic sophistication and complex structure of language, complex construction, I'm sorry, of language or construction of thoughts in language. What this means pretty much in a nutshell is that academic writing uses the highest level of language. Okay, you want to sound, your academic writing should be an example of the best use of language that you are capable of at this point, or that you are capable of producing, period, right? So if you're not such a good writer, just push yourself, read often, and just practice, right? Practice and imitate a style or a writer that you like, right? Because we can't really find our own way until we are shown different models, and we pick one that we like and we imitate it to the point where we understand, the essence behind it enough so that we can forge our own path. Okay, so that's the idea. All right, so that was a long-winded preamble or prelude or preface to the main topic of this lecture, which is the essay structure, but I felt that discussion was necessary and it should serve to contextualize our discussion on essay structure. So what is an essay? Well, essay really means to try, okay? But of course, essay is often used as a noun, which is, the essay is not usually used as a verb, and that's fine. Think of the essay as a collection of related paragraphs. Each paragraph conveys a central idea. Um, all right, so the basic essay structure in college has three components, right? No matter how long the essay is, or no matter how short the essay is, or no matter, who wrote it. It can be a scholar or a professor, or it can be a first-year college student, right? All academic writing must have these components in this order. It must have an introduction, it must have a body, and it must have a conclusion, right? No matter how long it is, you can have a scholarly article that is, I don't know, 60 pages long, and you compare it against, a student essay that is 3 pages long. Okay, those two those two different examples of academic writing may differ in so many ways that count, but the one thing that they both will have in common is that they follow the same basic structure, which is it has an introduction. The introduction of the scholarly article, I'm sure, could take up pages and pages, right? But nonetheless, it has an introduction part. It has a body and it has a conclusion. The introduction of the student essay may be just a paragraph, and the body may just be 2 or 3 paragraphs after that, and the conclusion may be the last paragraph. In the scholarly article, the body could be, the bulk of the article, right? Maybe the middle 40 pages, and the conclusion can be the last 5 pages or the last 2, 3 pages, right? No matter the length, okay? The main thing to learn here or to keep in mind here is that all academic writings share that same structure in that it starts with an introduction, it develops its idea in the body, and it concludes in the conclusion. All right, so let's talk about the introduction here. Okay. The introduction, well, let me back up. In this class, right, you will be writing all of your essays. Well, most of your essays will be 5 paragraphs, right? So you use this structure, but you expand it, right, in 5 paragraphs, which means the introduction will be your first paragraph, the body will be the next 3 paragraphs, and the conclusion will be the final 5th paragraph. Okay, it's just to make that clear. And of course, you don't have to always write just a 5 paragraph essay. That's just a basic starting point, right? Just to kind of give you some kind of grounding in this, new experience of writing in academic language. Or, but your essays may certainly contain more than 5 paragraphs. It can have 6 or 7 paragraphs, and those extra paragraphs, can be, in the body. Okay. Okay, the introduction is important. The introductory paragraph, the first paragraph is the one that determines whether or not your intended audience will read on. So it has to be interesting. It has to have some kind of hook. It has to generate interest in your reader in order to sustain that readership that we want, of course, because a piece of writing or any text would be rendered meaningless if it doesn't have an audience to interpret it and to evaluate it. Okay. So there are some strategies here that you can use to open up your essay with that hook, to open your essay in an interesting way that hopefully will help you in catching your readers' interest as well as keeping it. Well, catching first. You can open your introductory paragraph by asking an interesting question that is marginally related to your topic. Um, you can provide little known or surprising fact or statistics. You can tell a very brief story that quickly illustrates a specific point, right? You can give an interesting quotation. You can provide a declarative statement that expresses a unique position regarding the topic or makes an interesting comparison. So let's back up. Okay, let's say, you're writing on, let's say you're writing about, let's see here. Let's say you're writing about why the Roman Empire collapses. I know that's not the most interesting topic, right? So let's say you want to explore, you want to analyze the different factors that may have contributed to the collapse of the Roman Empire. Okay, how do you start out such a paragraph? There's so many ways. How would you start out with a declarative statement? What kind of things can you say? Um, you know, you can, one example of a declarative statement could be, many people have proclaimed that the U.S. is on the brink of following the path of the Roman Empire. Okay, that gives your reader some sort of an orientation about some sort of direction about where your essay is going, but as you can see, that statement doesn't immediately or quite give away yet what your essay is about, even though it does give some hints. It does, through specific terms such as the Roman Empire and the U.S. So you read on because you're curious about this connection between the U.S. and, the ancient empire of the Romans. Okay. So these is the kind of things that so these are the kind of strategies that you can take to have an interesting opening. And I think that it's best if you take a broad to narrow approach. What I mean by that is you want to start out by broad, okay, with a broad statement or question or whatever, but you don't want to give away too much about the main idea of your essay. You want to gradually, with each succeeding sentence, with each sentence, you want to gradually take your reader to the main point of your essay, to the main idea or thesis of your essay. But right away, you don't want to openly declare it right away without context. Okay, you want to open up with an interesting, maybe thought provocative um, opening thought provocative opener, right? To kind of get them thinking in a certain way, and then gradually, right, you lead them down a certain path towards the main focus, the main idea of your essay. So that's what I mean by broad to narrow approach, right? You don't want to right away declare, the main idea of your essay. Okay, that's a little bit sudden and out of nowhere, um, and it's not recommended. It's not effective. All right. So other things. So after that, okay, other things that needs to be included in the introductory paragraph is, just some basic context or background information about your topic, right? And of course, and of course, a statement of your topic, some context and background information, and a specific focus of your topic. What I mean by that is, a topic can be, education, the Electoral College, the presidency, higher education. Those are very broad topics, right? But you want to narrow them down. What about, what aspect of higher education do you want to write about? For example, do you want to write about, tuition? Do you want to write about the rising costs? Which would fall under tuition? Do you want to write about, student debt? Do you want to write about college professors' tenure, or things like that? So for any given broad topics like that, you can certainly narrow it down to different aspects, and you can even further narrow it down, as much as you can. But I would say that for a short 5 paragraph essay, your topic needs to be very narrowed, very specific. Okay. And then you give enough background context information. And then the last item, the last sentence of your introductory paragraph should be the thesis statement. The thesis statement is the thesis statement expresses your idea, your argument about your specific focus, about your narrowed focus. So let's say you're writing an essay on how colleges and universities should eliminate professor tenureship. Okay. Okay. Then why? So your thesis statement would declare that college, and this is just an example, that college should eliminate the tenure system, right, in favor of, and of course you would offer an alternative system because, and then you would provide your 3 reasons. Okay, so that's the thesis statement. Thesis statement is a summary of your writing, tells your reader what your essay is about, tells your reader what your specific issue is, right? And your argument about the issue. In this case, your specific issue is college tenureship, and your argument is that it needs to be eliminated and be replaced with something else because da da da. That's your thesis statement. That's what your entire essay is about. Every essay that you'll be writing for this class has to have a thesis statement. Okay, and the thesis statement should occur at the end of the introductory paragraph. Okay, right here it appears at the end of the introduction. A thesis statement has 2 parts. It usually states what the specific issue is. In the example that I used, the specific issue is college tenureship, right? And I did mention it in the sample thesis statement. And what about the college? What is the idea or argument about the college tenureship? Well, it should be eliminated because blah blah. Okay, so the thesis statement should has 2 parts: what and why, in a way. Okay. Okay, so this slide just talks about the importance of a thesis statement. If you don't have a thesis statement, or if you have a weak thesis statement, or not clearly expressed thesis statement, points will be taken off because the thesis statement is the heart of the essay, metaphorically speaking. So here are some samples of thesis statement. Standardized testing can produce adverse effects on student learning. In this case, the thesis statement tells me, it states the specific issue, which is standardized testing, and then it states, well, what is the argument? What is the writer's argument about standardized testing? Well, the writer's argument is that it can produce adverse effects on student learning. Another example of thesis statement: eating out too often can eventually impress upon children abnormal ideas about food preparation and create spoiled eating habits. The specific issue is eating out too often. Well, what is the argument about that? Well, the argument about that is it can impress upon children abnormal ideas about food preparation and create spoiled eating habits. Next example: living in a subdivision regulated by the homeowner association is often worth the trouble and the cost. Okay, the specific issue is living in a subdivision regulated by the homeowner association. Well, what about it? It is often worth the trouble and the cost. That's the argument. Okay, so like I say, you need to have a clearly expressed thesis statement like these examples here, and they need to be placed at the end of the introductory paragraph. Do not begin a thesis statement with I believe, I think, I feel, etc. Right? Do not believe with an I statement. I believe, I think, I feel, because, or in my opinion, or in my belief, or in my experience, because it is a given, right? And that is how you reveal yourself to be to be an inexperienced writer or to be a writer not understanding academic principles of academic writing. Okay, another types of thesis statement. There are thesis statements. There are two types. There are one type. The other type that I just read in the previous slide does not provide the three main points for discussion. But you can also but the other type is you can provide three main points of discussion. So, for example, standardized testing shrinks possibilities for instructional creativity, encourages rote learning, and effaces student individuality. You notice that this thesis statement is essentially the same as this first example right here, right? But what is the difference? They're just stated differently, but they are essentially the same argument. Just the difference here is the thesis statement doesn't provide uh, the specific adverse effects that it's arguing that standardized testing can produce, right? But here in this example, the specific effects, right, are stated. So that is the only difference. So you can have a thesis statement that state your reasons or the three main points of discussion, or you can have one that do not state the three main points of discussion. Okay. So anyway, but the three main points of but even if you're opting for a thesis statement that doesn't list your reasons or your three main points of discussion, you need to have them in mind. So let's say you're writing an essay on this first thesis right here, right? And you're going for this thesis statement rather than spelling out the three effects, the three adverse effects, right? Even if you're going for this method, you still have to be aware. You still have to know exactly which what these adverse effects are, and you still have to be prepared to develop each of these effects and support them effectively in the body of your essay. So regardless of what thesis statement you choose, as part of your writer list decision, you have to be aware of your three main points of discussion, whether or not they are stated. All right, so here is a sample introductory paragraph that takes the broad to narrow approach that I talked about, and it started with one of those strategies, one of the 5 strategies, and it gradually leads the reader to the thesis statement. So it goes from broad and gradually it narrows down to a focus, culminating in the thesis statement right here. I'm not going to read that over, but you can certainly do so. And this is just a different introductory paragraph that takes a different opening strategy. Instead of having just a statement, it opens with a question. All right, so let's talk about the body. The body is a very, very important component of the essay. So after the introductory paragraph, you begin the first body paragraph. Now, in a 5-paragraph essay, your body, like I said, is the second, third, and fourth paragraph. Okay, so your body is the most substantial component of your essay, and it is also the longest component. It consists of 3 paragraphs, but the body's purpose is to develop and support your thesis. All right, so if your thesis is standardized testing shrinks possibilities for instructional creativity, encourages rote learning, and effaces student individuality, then your first body paragraph needs to discuss the first main point of discussion here, which is how standardized testing shrinks possibilities for instructional creativity. You're going to explain how it does that, and you would use evidence and data to support specific evidence and data to support your argument that it does this. It shrinks possibilities for blah, blah, blah. Okay. Your second body paragraph, you will discuss the main idea of that second body paragraph is this. It will discuss how standardized testing encourages rote learning. First, you might want to define rote learning if you were to write on this essay, what it means and how it's bad. And how, not that it's bad, but how it is probably the least favored mode of learning, and how standardized testing encourages that. Okay, and then your third body paragraph will discuss the third main idea the third main point of discussion, which is how standardized testing affects student individuality. You explain how it brings that about, and you use evidence and other types of data to support your argument, right? Because again, the underlying the underlying purpose of our academic writer is really to convince your audience of your point of view, of your argument, right? You don't have to try to change their mind and make them a believer, but the kind of reaction that you want to produce from your audience as they're reading your writing is to have them go, ah, okay, or to have them just without knowing, nodding their head as they're reading in agreement, right? And of course, you won't be there to see this, right? But if you were, this is the kind of reaction that you want to see, that those ah moment, okay? So that's essentially the body. You begin each body paragraph, so the body develops each of the uh, three main points of the thesis, or three main reasoning for the thesis. So you always begin with a topic sentence. You always begin a body paragraph with the topic sentence that clearly states the main idea of that body paragraph. So again, in this case, the first body paragraph's topic would be standardized testing shrinks possibilities for instructional creativity. Now, you don't want to reuse words that you've already used in the thesis statement verbatim, so you may want to try a different way of stating this exact same argument, but just in different ways, just in fresher ways, so that you're not creating a boring moment for your reader, or it's just, a lazy moment as a writer. Okay? So you want to state the same idea here, but you don't want to reuse the words that you've used in the exact same order that you've used them. You want to arrive at the same exact idea, but in different ways, using different constructions. So that's the body. And then the rest of the body, you will go back and you will provide specific details. You will show exactly how it does that, and you will bring in data and evidence to show the connection between the evidence and and your argument, and to draw conclusions that is favorable to your argument based on the data, and so forth. Okay, so some evidential support, evidence or data you can use are, specific details, descriptions, explanations, examples, statistics, quotations in different sources, so forth. Okay, and of course, you have to think about organization, okay, of your body. Okay, now look at these three main points of discussion, three main reasons for how standardized test to argue how standardized testing is, to use plain terms, bad. Okay, why would you want to discuss this first, and why would you want to discuss this second, and why would you want to discuss this third? Is there some kind of pattern? Once you start to look at these three main points of discussion, do you see a pattern? Maybe a pattern in decreasing importance, or a pattern in increasing importance? I don't know, but you have to be able to explain to yourself why you would want to discuss this first in the first body paragraph, and this second and this third, right? What kind of pattern do they make? If you were to discuss them in that order, you have to have a pattern, okay? You can't just arbitrarily, choose, oh, I'm going to discuss this first, I'm going to discuss this second. But whatever pattern you choose, make sure that it is also the order in which you list them in your thesis statement. Oops, sorry, let me scroll down here. All right, finally, in the conclusion, your conclusion paragraph is pretty much your last chance to seduce your reader. Remind your reader of the essay's overall main idea. Leave your reader with some final, thoughtful, insightful statements about your topic. So your conclusion, yes, you do restate just some general main ideas. You want to remind your reader of the purpose of your essay, but it's your last chance to make a certain impression on your reader, whatever that impression may be, that is related to your purpose for writing. It is also, your last chance to leave your reader with some final, thoughtful, insightful statements about your topic, or your issue, something to kind of, leave them breathless with, so to speak. All right. And also throughout the entire composition, the writing, make sure that you use transitional expressions. Make sure that you connect one idea to the next, one sentence to the next by using signal phrases or signal clauses to kind of tie them together because you don't want your reading to sound choppy. Right? Just think about the word choppy, right? Choppy is derived from chop, right? What do you do when you chop a carrot? Right? It means you take a whole carrot and you break them into different pieces, thereby you're disconnecting them. So you don't want your writing to sound choppy, to sound disconnected, right? To sound as if they're just different parts and they're unrelated. You want that whole carrot piece. You don't want the pieces, um, that is the result of your chopping them up. Okay. Um, so that's it I have on the essay structure. Please, revisit this lecture or this PowerPoint if you need to, and apply this basic structure to all of your writing in this class, to all of your essays in this class.